Good morning, everyone. Good morning. Just be a moment before we get started. Just about ready to get started. Okay. Good morning, Sunnyvale. I'm Sunnyvale Mayor Larry Klein. Thanks for joining me again this week. Happy Arbor Day. Happy Adopt a Shelter Pet Day. You might have seen my post from earlier this morning. I hope everyone's had a good week and enjoyed some time in the good weather we've had outside. This is my 59th installment of the weekly virtual office hour address, and people continue to say they appreciate these live stream addresses and hearing from their mayor. So I'll continue to do these through the end of shelter in place and probably a lot longer. We've now reached 410 days after the March 16th, 2020 county health order of shelter in place started the attempt to slow the spread of the virus. Since that first declaration, a lot has happened. A lot has happened almost every day. And so a year ago, I thought it'd be a great idea to convert my weekly office hours into that were happening at Bean Scene to these virtual live stream events, and they're really good because they allow me to answer some of your questions, give you some updates, and just provide some general words of encouragement. So thank you for allowing me to continue to represent you and advocate for you during definitely trying times and ever-changing times, but it's been a positive result over the last year. So thank you for allowing me to continue to do that. Hope everyone's had a good week. Please remember to take care of yourself both physically and mentally. And these have been a little crazy times, but things might be getting a little better. So we'll see. Continue to follow the county health order. Please do what you can to stop the spread of the virus. Wash your hands, don't touch your face, maintain safe social distancing when you're out, wear your mask. And the CDC changed the guidelines recently that if you're outside and you most likely don't need to wear a mask unless you're in a crowd of people. But wear your mask when you can, and of course, get your vaccination when it's your time. And right now, pretty much the majority of the people out there can get vaccinated. So most of you are currently eligible to get that vaccination. So let's go ahead and get this started. Let's talk about what's happened at the federal, the state, the county, and the city level over the last few weeks. So let's see. Starting last week was Earth Week, and there are a lot of events from a city standpoint. So a week ago, Sunday was the Cook-Off for Climate, and so from the Cook-Off for Climate standpoint, definitely it was a lot of fun. It was a cooking competition between myself, the deputy city manager, and the director of environmental resources. Basically, it was a little fun event to basically highlight cooking on induction stovetop. So, I didn't win. I was actually happy though to try out that induction cooktop. We have one ourselves, and my wife is the one who mainly uses that. It's good in the backyard when you're cooking something that has a lot of fumes and things of that nature. But it was a lot of fun, and throughout last week and kind of continuing on into this week, we've had multiple events, online events, composting events, an EV workshop. There's cooking events for kids that Tony Chef Tony from Goombas did. So it's been actually a fun week as far as that's concerned. And then let's see, last Tuesday, uh, from a personal standpoint, I reached 200 restaurants with my mayor's restaurant project, and it's been really fun to a large degree to get to meet a lot of the owners and workers at different restaurants and highlight the variety of restaurants that we have in our city. So I continue to do that, and will continue to do that for a while now. And then last Tuesday evening, Sunnyvale City Council met, and we had a presentation to start off that meeting from VTA talking about their Tasman uh, Drive corridor study. And so, from that standpoint, they talked about conceivably what could be done to improve biking and walking along that whole corridor, connecting down to Calabasas Trail. There's lots of good things that could be done there, and now it's just finding the funding. We also had several special orders of the day. We had Asian American Heritage Month, which is May, which is coming up, and we had one of our Heritage Commission uh, representatives come and speak with us to talk about one of the things that we've been able to do is highlight Asian contributions within Sunnyvale and within the Bay Area. We also highlighted Earthquake Preparedness Month, which is April. So we had one of our members from our CERT team come in and talk about the different programs that they're providing. So I highlighted that earlier this week. And of course, speaking about upcoming May, it's also Affordable Housing Month. It used to be Affordable Housing Week, but now that everything's virtual, it continues throughout the month. So we had a speaker from SB at Home come and speak to us about their programs and ultimately a lot of the different events that they're having over the next month. And then as far as the generals meeting is concerned, we had several things, one of which is discussing the MOU. So from a housing strategy standpoint, it was discussing the MOU negotiations that have been ongoing from from a mobile home park community standpoint. The stakeholders from the landlords as well as the residents have been meeting and going through, and that process is been going along fairly well since January. So that was a good overview. We had lots of public input as far as that's concerned, and then the stakeholders kind of talked about what their goals are There's still a few months of negotiations to go through, but it's looking like they should meet some, and we're hoping that the council doesn't have to force uh, some sort of mediation or some sort of compromise. Which it'd be better if both of those groups met, ultimately figured out what the compromise is, as opposed to the council having to come in and create an ordinance. So we'll see where that goes as far as that's concerned, but hopefully uh, that can be done relatively soon, as far as that negotiation that's been ongoing. And then, as far the other thing, that as far as the general meeting was concerned, we talked about the project alternatives for the Mary Overpass, and this has been ongoing. But from an EIR standpoint, we'd already said we were going to be studying the 5 different EIR alternatives: no project, 4 lanes of traffic, 2 lanes of traffic, sorry, 4 lanes of traffic, and bike and ped, 2 lanes of traffic, bike and ped, or 2 lanes of HOV, bike and ped, or a bike and ped only bridge. So council discussed it for quite a bit, and ultimately chose, at least from a EIR standpoint, of choosing the third option, 2 lanes of HOV plus bike and ped, as the main option from the study. But we're studying all 5, and it's still not ultimately, after the EIR, and from a CEQA standpoint, we go through that full CEQA process. At that point, then we choose, after we finish that whole process, council will choose what the preferred option is. And then we look at funding and things of that nature. So, but that was one of the other things that the council did. And then last Wednesday, Governor Newsom had a press conference in the dry bottom of the Lake Mendocino. So it was to highlight that there are drought conditions, and we've had our second year of uh, not great rain. So definitely the wildfire season last year was bad. We'll see how this year is going to be. But the governor was saying that we might be considering broader declaration of drought conditions throughout the state. But right now, it's only those 2 counties, Napa and Mendocino County. And so there's still a lot to be discussed. There were declarations this week by many of the water districts to say people need to reduce the amount of water that they're using, but definitely it's not water restrictions yet, although that could change in the next month or so. And then last Friday, Santa Clara County Health met, and they declared that we just surpassed 1 million, and that was a big milestone. 1 million Santa Clara County residents that have received at least 1 dose of the COVID-19 vaccine. So that was good, and that was after a lot of negotiations with our federal representatives, after the state had kind of reduced the number of vaccines that we were getting. So we were only getting about 50 to 70,000 a week from the state, at least from the county health standpoint. And so it was important to, after dealing with our federal representatives, and I appreciate all the work that our Congress members have been doing behind the scenes to make sure that we get enough vaccines, and we've had about almost 300,000 additional vaccines doses from the federal government. And so that, along with the state, has allowed us to increase the number of doses that we've been able to get. So that was a really great thing to hear. And then, of course, last Friday, the government and the state announced that the J&J vaccine would also be, it was cleared that they could actually resume vaccinations with the J&J vaccine, which makes things a lot simpler as far as giving that single dose. So last Friday, that announcement was made. There aren't, and the county had some doses that had been held back. after they stopped that, after the 6 women had had negative reactions based upon blood clotting. So from that standpoint, they've had certain vaccines that they've held back from J&J, but they've had a lot more Pfizer and Moderna that they've been able to administer in the meantime. And then on Monday of this week, the California Secretary of State announced that critics of Governor Newsom had actually passed the threshold for enough validated signatures, and so that will kick off a 30 business day period where people who signed the recall petition have a chance to withdraw their names. That being said, most likely that won't change dramatically in the next 30 days. And then after that 30-day period, county election officials will have or 10 business days to report how many signatures that they received. And then if that threshold still surpasses the 1.5 million, which most likely it will, then there's a budgetary review and a scheduling process that will last a month or two. And so the recall election most likely will happen as early as late summer or as late as December. Most likely October, November period is when that would actually happen. So we'll see how that goes. There's a lot of time between now and that recall election day. We'll see where things go as far as from a state standpoint. And then on Monday of this week, Santa Clara County Health announced that no appointment walk-in vaccinations would be available for everyone. So no appointment needed. Fantastic, at least from Tuesday to this Sunday. And so at least the 13 locations around the county, and there's a lot more that now have enough vaccines that they're also doing walk-ins. So this is all because of the federal vaccine allotment that we got. So if you need to get vaccinated, go to sccfreevax.org and you can get an appointment, or you can do walk-in at Levi's at the county or at the county fairgrounds, and a lot of the different clinics around the county are doing basically walk-up vaccination. So it's really good. I'll talk a little bit more about a Sunnyvale location that we've been able to have also do walk-in vaccinations earlier this week. Okay, and then on Tuesday, it was finally announced, and so good news for Sunnyvale, that REI will be moving into the Toys R Us, Babies R Us location at Sunnyvale, Saratoga, and El Camino Real. That location's been empty for quite a while now. And from my standpoint, I'd reached out to Toys R Us when last year, or actually it's almost 2 years ago now, that they were opening up a handful of stores around the U.S. That was, of course, before COVID. So, but the president never got back with me, and I highlighted, there's a history with this store and hoping to get a brick and mortar store, especially Toys R Us was very popular with parents and children, hoping to get that back in to Sunnyvale. But in the meantime, REI has been looking at that location for some time now. They wanted to expand their Mountain View store, and so this was a good location, and they finally finalized those agreements. They started construction, so the signs are, the Toys R Us and Babies R Us signs are still out front. That being said, the fences are around the site, and they're actually, working indoors already. So good for Sunnyvale. I think that's a positive influence. They're good community partners, so helping to fund 5K runs and bike rides, bike to work day, all of that. So all those are positive from a city standpoint. It's good to have a unique, and I'll say that a unique business in your city. There's only a handful in Northern California, so REI brings a lot of positive connections into the community. So looking forward to that opening maybe as early as the end of this year. And then on Wednesday of this week, water agencies around Northern California, especially, released uh, basically a request asking residents to conserve water. This has been, there are currently no big fines, but they're asking for everyone to do a 10% water reduction. And on a positive note, looking back after the big drought a few years ago, water usage is way down amongst the Bay Area, especially. So everyone has been doing their part to reduce their usage. Converting to low flow toilets, and then replacing their front lawns with more natural, or more natural, more environmentally and water friendly uh, landscaping. So that's been very positive. A lot of the water districts will be putting uh, putting forth programs again to encourage people to do that conversion. So please, do your part. Right now it's the carrot as opposed to the stick, but that funding, to make sure that people are using less water is a very positive thing that you can do for the environment. And then yesterday, on Thursday, Governor Newsom was in San Fernando, basically to do a press conference for signing Assembly Bill 80. And so Assembly Bill 80 was passed unanimously in both houses, both state houses, and signed by Governor Newsom to ultimately help small business owners. And so this was because of the federal loans, so the pandemic loans that they provided. This makes sure that small businesses aren't being taxed on those, and so uh, this gives them that money for free. So if they were qualified for those state loans that they were needing additional assistance, this doesn't, the federal government basically said that they didn't need to be taxed, and so this makes sure that the state tax relief um, isn't, that they don't then tax those funds that were coming from the federal government. So they're not seen as income; they were seen as basically loans, to make sure that for those companies that did experience significant loss because of COVID-19 and because of the pandemic, if they've, the costs associated with the pandemic, whatever they might be, you know 25% reduction in profits and all that, it helps that them basically meet that they don't have to pay additional funds and come up with additional funds to pay the state taxes after they put out all this funding to keep their employees employed, or expend all this additional funds because of PPE. And then the governor also reported that California has the lowest case rate in the US, so that's fantastic. We currently have 33 cases per 100,000 people. So, that's a fantastic thing. That's showing that people are being safe. It's also showing as we get more vaccinated, the chance of COVID-19 spread has dropped dramatically. And the press conference was also kind of interesting. Danny Trejo, the actor, was there to add a little humor, and push for Governor Newsom and against the recall. But it was, so this is one of the things that I've been doing is watching those press conferences, watching, advocating with our federal leaders, with our county and state leaders, to make sure that Sunnyvale does it. It gets what it deserves, and trying to figure out the best path forward as far as the COVID-19 pandemic and recovery is concerned. So let's go ahead and get to our weekly numbers. So from cases and hospitalization, from the U.S. standpoint, we're doing a lot better. Some hot spots, but in generally looking good. Of course, around the world, and especially India, we've seen a surge in the number of cases. So there's lots of US and California support going towards India right now, and a lot of local organizations that are fundraising to make sure that there's additional assistance going into India. So if you can, if you can support any of those local efforts, definitely do that. It is it's a worldwide effort to fight this virus, and doing what we can from a city, county, state, and a federal standpoint is the right thing to do. And then from a national standpoint, new COVID cases, we passed 32 million cases, but that's only about 300,000 cases in the last week. That's down from 500,000 that we've been seeing for the last few weeks. Nationally, we've had 237 million vaccines distributed, and so that's fantastic. We still have had, we're still having people pass away because of COVID-19. So we've had 571,000 deaths. That's about 5,000 additional in the last week, all related to COVID-19. And then from California standpoint, we've had 3.8 million positive cases of COVID-19. We still only having, and we're down now even more, about 1,500 cases a day for the last week. So lowest in the nation, and that's very positive as far as hopefully watching hospitalizations and deaths drop because we're not spreading the vaccine or the COVID-19 as quickly within the state. So less cases. It's still important though that people get vaccinated. Vaccines aren't 100% foolproof. So that if you're out there, especially if you're a healthcare worker, if you're on the front lines, or if you think you might have been exposed, definitely it's important to go and get tested. And then California has had about 60,000 fatalities, and we're over 29 million vaccines administered, about 3 million just in the last week. So we're doing really well as far as that's concerned. And then from the state standpoint, we're still at number 11 as far as residents that have received at least one dose. So we're 45%. So we're about 45% of our residents have received at least one dose. And then we're still, as far as residents that are fully vaccinated, we're still fairly, we're fairly low. We're about number 30. We were number 31 last week. So with about 30% of our residents are fully vaccinated. So almost a third. So it's positive, but there are definitely a lot of states that have people that are fully vaccinated, a lot more percentage of the residents. And California is a big state. Of course, that does make it that much more difficult here to make sure that we're reaching, both the cities as well as the rural areas of the state. And then as far as within the county, county the number of new cases continues to go down. So we've had about 118,000 cases. That's only 600 in the last week. That's down from 1,000 over the last few weeks. And then we've had 2,060 deaths and about 30 new deaths in the last week. And as far as hospitalizations, we're still around 70. We're currently at 73. So that the number of people in the hospitals due to COVID-19 seems to be fairly static, 60 or 70 for the last month or so, and 634,000 people 16 years of age and over are fully vaccinated. So that's about 39% of our county, doing much better than the state overall, and about over 1 million. So this was last week, but we're about now at 1,000,000 87,000, almost 90,000 people with at least one dose of the vaccine. And so that's 67. So 67% of the county. Um, so 2/3 of all of our county residents have received at least one dose. So it's positive. Definitely we have a ways to go. It's reaching the people now that are harder, that have been staying at home, that don't have as much mobility. It's getting out in the communities, and I'm working with county health to try to reach some of those members in Sunnyvale, because definitely we have certain census tracts that have had more issues as far as getting the vaccine. So anyway, uh, that's from a vaccination standpoint, from a testing standpoint, I continue to do a lot of advocating on your behalf, on our city's behalf. At the county level, we have our weekly discussions. As far as testing, the county health man was here this past Monday in Murphy Park, like they have been. They're here every second and fourth Mondays. So if you ever want to get tested, all you need to do is go to sccfreetest.org and you can get tested. They're here from 9:30 to 9:30 a.m. to 4 p.m. in Murphy Park. And then, of course, the county mobile vaccination clinic was here in Murphy Park this past Wednesday, distributing 500 doses. So their mobile health van always has about 500 doses. You can make appointments. A certain percentage are for walk-ins, but they always end up using all their doses. So, but if you want to find out information about when they'll be here, or all the different sites that are doing now, walk-in vaccinations, no appointment needed, or if you want an appointment in a special time, you can go to sccfreevax.org and you can sign up there. So, and then of course I wanted to announce some upcoming events. Today is the last day to submit your applications for boards and commissions. So I've been talking about this for the last few weeks. One of the best ways you can get involved in the city is to be on our board and commission. And so that's up to a 4-year term, depending upon whether or not you're finishing someone's previous term. But you can really give back to the city. So it's community outreach. It's giving council input and recommendations on different topics, and we have 10 different boards that are currently taking applications. The art commissions, the board of library trustees, the bicycle pedestrian and advocacy commission, the board of building code appeals, heritage preservation, housing and human services, parks and rec, personnel, planning commission, and the sustainability commission are all taking applications. The application is due at 5 p.m. today, so you have a little bit of time. If you go to the city website, you can get that application, fill it out, and turn it in or email it to the city clerk. So from that standpoint, outside, go on, outside. And Buddy has his say. It's going to be a busy weekend, so there's lots of events coming up. And so tomorrow, Saturday, is Charles Street Gardens. They're having another spring garden sale from 10 a.m. to 3 p.m. So these aren't leftovers from the last time. They had a certain amount of seedlings that were smaller and were continuing to grow. So they're now ready for purchase. So if you can go to Charles Street Garden from 10 a.m. to 2 p.m. tomorrow, and so that's our first community gardens. I was one of the founding members about 15 years ago. They are taking or selling their seedlings, and you can go by, you can visit, but it's right there at Charles Street and Olive, right near the library. And then also there's 2 anti-Asian hate rallies this weekend. These have been going on intermittently over the last month, but on Saturday in Santa Clara at Franklin Square from noon until 2 p.m. And then on Sunday in downtown Palo Alto from 2 p.m. to 5 p.m. So there's a march and a rally in Palo Alto. So definitely, if you want to take part, those events are going on. And then on Sunday, the Heritage Park Museum is open to the public for the first time in over a year. So I was always, I was on the board for the Historical Society, but the museum, if you haven't had a chance to go, it's right behind the community center, the senior center, right in that area, right next to the orchard. But definitely, if you want to find out more about Sunnyvale history, if you want to, their gift shop will be open. So if you wanted to visit the museum shop and see what items that they have, and there's always a mixture of new items as well as donated donated interesting items that people have, necklaces and all that. And Mother's Day is just right around the corner. You might want to drop by there, and they're open from noon until 4 p.m. on Sunday, and they're open Sundays, Tuesdays, and Thursdays, but Sunday is the first day in over a year. And then as far as upcoming council meetings, so next Tuesday, May 4th, council will meet. They'll have several study issues. One of is talking about their cultural inclusion study issue, and then also kind of our economic development strategy. So that will start off our evening next Tuesday. There'll also be several special orders of the day, Public Works Week, Nurses Week, as well as Municipal Clerks Week. So those are several quick celebrations at the beginning of the meeting. As far as the meeting itself, there will be several items, one of which is the redistricting outreach and meeting schedule. So we'll be talking about the concept of redistricting. Definitely that the census data is about to be released. There's already been preliminary data released that shows that definitely that California will be losing at least one Congress member, but that data will be released to from a county standpoint, from a city standpoint, later this year. They were saying it wasn't going to be until August. We'll see. Maybe that's going to be sped back up now, but you can apply. The applications are open, not just for our boards and commissions, which are due today, but for the redistricting commission. Those applications are due at the end of May, so you have a little more time as far as that's concerned. But we'll be discussing that community outreach from that commission standpoint at our next meeting, and then we'll also be talking about our 2021 Housing and Urban Development HUD, action plan. So we'll be going through that. Meetings later in May, of course, is May 20th, our all-day budget session. So lots of meetings coming up, lots of big issues that the council will be going through. But it's always interesting. I think we'll have a few long meetings coming up, and then of course we'll also have interviews for all of our boards and commissions next weekend, or about in a week and a half. But if you're interested, turn in your applications and you can go through the interview process. Let's go ahead and get to some of the weekly questions, and lots of weekly questions this week. Let me go through and pull those up. Julie asked, for years we talked about how cool it would be to ride bikes to our movie theater. So I bought my son friend's tickets for his birthday, and after King Kong, he came out and found out the bike that was locked up was gone in broad daylight. What can be done? So I did follow up with City Line. AMC is just a tenant, but City Line is going to increase the security patrols throughout that area. And one of the things that a lot of people don't know is that there are actually not just bike racks, but bike lockers in the parking garages. So if you go into the old, what I'll call J.C. Penney's parking structure, when they renovated that parking structure, they put in bike racks just before you go up to the stairs to the back, what I'll call the south entrance into Whole Foods. So there's that. There's one there. There's one, I think, there's several bike lockers in each of the different parking structures. So that's something that you can also be looked at. But City Line is looking at whether or not they want to add cameras downtown, and there's a whole thing about security versus privacy on during that whole in that whole mall area. But they'll also be looking at, as far as they do have patrols and making sure that they're going through that area on a regular basis is important. Cindy asked, I heard there was a hate crime that occurred in Sunnyvale last weekend. What happened? And so, yes, and you might have seen this on the news. It actually got a little, well, it was on several of the local news stations. But last Sunday, or last Saturday night at some time, Sunday morning, someone broke the window at La Bon Kitchen, and so it's one of the Vietnamese restaurants. Um, this one is, and it used to be a food truck, and I used to go to it when it was a food truck. I highlighted it as part of my mayor's restaurant project and met the owners a while ago, but uh, the brick and mortar, and they became a brick and mortar place, is at Persian and Lawrence Expressway, just before you get to 237. But someone broke their window and left a racist note. They didn't steal anything. They didn't cause, any issues inside, but they did break that window. And one of the good things about the mayor's restaurant project is, meeting all the owners and having, a good contact with them. So they actually contacted the mayor directly. They contacted public safety like they should, but they also you know, contacted me to tell me what had gone on. I've, met with since then. I met with the owners. I've been by. You know, it's not. These type of these type of occurrences don't reflect Sunnyvale's values. This hate hate and extremism have no place in our communities. And so, I was really saddened, about this terrible event. It's really, but it does show that there are still people out there that are causing problems. It's making sure that people stand up. People basically, if they see anything happening, need to speak out against any sort of, not just extremism, but if there's injustice that you're seeing in your community, definitely speak out. And so it was good to meet the owner. We talked about doing a GoFundMe, and he doesn't really, he's fine. His father's in construction, so the window will be replaced, and it was all boarded up when I was there. But it was good to hear that he wants to deal with basically focus on the foundations, focus on the support groups that are fighting against anti-Asian hate in our community, or extremism of any kind in our community, and not just, it's like making sure that he's good. So if you get a chance, definitely support Le Bon Kitchen, support all of our restaurants, but it was good to hear his story. And as much as we don't like events like that happening in our community, and it is an open investigation by public safety. So if you know of anything, definitely contact public safety and pass on that information. But it is currently an open case. We'll see where that goes. But it was good to visit them and support local businesses, support Le Bon if you get a chance. Vanessa asked, "Hi Mayor Klein, how are the unhoused neighbors doing these days? It seems like the pandemic has been rough on them." Definitely, Vanessa, I agree. The pandemic has not been easy for anyone, especially those unhoused. We've done eviction moratoriums to make sure that we're not having more unhoused. Of course, I do worry about what happens in June, July, and there's been incentives put in place to make sure that the state tries to help landlords with that back rent, and pay part of that if they say that they're not going to evict their tenants. So it's been positive from that standpoint, but definitely we have seen a good number of unhoused. We've been helping Sunnyvale Community Services and residents. I'm happy to see residents get together to assist some of our unhoused. The city, of course, does house a certain number in hotels, from Fair Oaks Park. And I've been working with the county to get resources, testing, vaccinations, assistance to those that are unhoused in our community. And ultimately, I'm hoping that as you know our vaccinations are going to make it easier, we'll be able to increase the people. One of the things that we did about a year and a half ago, or about a year ago, was increase the number of people that could be at the Hamlin shelter. So it used to be a winter shelter, and now it's a year-round shelter. It's a transitionary shelter as unhoused residents find permanent housing. But currently there's only about 80 people there, and it's singles, it's couples, it's families. But getting them permanent housing is it's a transitionary shelter, all by recommendation from service organizations. And ultimately, now that people are being vaccinated, hopefully we can get more people there. It could have up to 175 beds there. So hopefully that will move forward quickly, and we can get a lot more people into that transitionary shelter that then leads into permanent housing. So we'll see where that goes. I'm working with our county supervisors as far as that's concerned, and also I've been working with some volunteers in Mountain View that are helping run in Mountain View, they're running several safe parking lots, and so working with them to see, whether or not we can partner with several, let's say, agencies within Sunnyvale that can do something similar. So we'll see where that goes. Hopefully that goes fairly well. Allison asked, and actually several people asked, any idea what's happening at the old Osh location? And so I've been hearing from people for a while now, Orchard Supply, people miss Orchard Supply. Of course, Lowe's purchased Osh about 4 years ago, and subsequently ended up closing all the Osh locations. They've reopened a few stores around the nation. I was hoping that might be, we had 2 Osh locations within Sunnyvale. I was, hoping that might be one of them. We'll see if that comes to pass. But at least what I saw, about a year and a half ago after Osh closed, was a preliminary design for apartments with retail along the bottom. So retail along Sunnyvale, Saratoga, or and Matilda, or Sunnyvale and Matilda. We'll see, those plans have been put on hold, at least as far as I know. I haven't heard anything recently. They're actually assembling ADUs on that old site. So it is actually being utilized now, but it's for ADU construction, which is always also positive from a community standpoint. And let's see. Andrea asked. Yes. So Andrea asked several weeks ago, when you do your Friday morning live chats, you often stand in front of a piece of artwork. I'm part of the art club, and I would be gladly arrange for a new piece weekly if you're interested. So, yes, what has been behind part of the office, and when my wife and I, go on our trips around the world, try to do one international trip every year. Over the last few years, we've been bringing art back, and so what was behind me was a painting from Santiago de Cuba, a Cuba trip that we did 4 or 5 years ago. But starting today, we have a piece of art, and it's called Cabin in Montonoy Valley. So for those of you that want to take a look at the art behind me, and it was done by Ishwarya Ramanathan. And so if you want to purchase that art, so you can take a look at that art behind me. If you want to purchase that art, you can reach out to me. I will then put you in contact with the Sunnyvale Art Club. and you can contact them about purchasing that piece of art. But you'll see that change every week or two from the artwork behind me over for the subsequent future as we continue to do these virtual meetings. But definitely it's nice to have a little change of scenery. So hopefully we'll see different pieces of work, different pieces of art over the next few months. But we have our first piece up, and hopefully you enjoy seeing something a little different than the standard artwork that I've had over the last year. And let's see, David asked, will you restart your in-person office hours? So yes, I will, David. I had some of my first meetings at the coffee shop, Being Seen downtown, this past week. So I'm starting to get back into kind of that routine. Ultimately, we'll see how quickly we do this. The 9 to 10 a.m. Virtual office hours. It works fairly well for people. So we'll probably continue that. Maybe I'll meet for people for coffee for an hour before or after. We'll see how that goes. So definitely it's trying to figure out what works best for people. Ultimately, it's been very positive experience having those office hours for so many years now. Talking to people, hearing their ideas, hearing their complaints, of course, and trying to figure out how to solve their problems or how to get more involved. So it's been very positive from that standpoint. Uh, let's see. Yeah, I think that's the majority of questions this week. Um, there is talk. So yeah, dancing in the streets of downtown Sunnyvale maybe. Uh, can we consider throwing a welcome back party maybe this for the fall? Um, so yes, ultimately there will start being events downtown. As people are vaccinated, and you saw the CDC comments that as long as you're not in big groups, you won't, you don't need to wear a mask. If you're in big groups, you still need to wear a mask when you're outside. But the chances of contracting COVID when you're outside is dramatically reduced. Uh, so there will be some events coming up starting in June, it looks like. And we're planning, so I've been working with the Downtown Association, ultimately the summer, on into the fall. The Sunnyvale Art and Wine Festival will be reduced, but it will be happening the first weekend of October. So we're starting to have more events. The first event probably will be in June, and you'll hear more information about that when that date has been fixed. But definitely we're starting to see things come back to normal, having some music downtown, having, I think it's already being more lively now that it's a pedestrian only zone. I think, celebrating that people are back and, back able to be in a more lively environment as far as downtown Sunnyvale is a great thing for our restaurants, for our businesses, and it's just great for people that have been cooped up inside for so long now. So anyway, I look forward to that, and as events are scheduled, I'll be reporting them here. And so with that, I think it's time to wrap up. Thanks for joining me again this week. As always, I just want to say I'm really proud of Sunnyvale's response to the pandemic. Life continues to be difficult, and things change on a weekly basis. I know new issues come up, but your actions really do make a difference. Wear your mask when you have to, when you're indoors, when you can't socially distance with people that you don't know. But continue to help others and build community. I'm really proud to see people, our Sunnyvale residents pulling together to help those in need, seniors, the unhoused, just sharing what they have, whether or not that's books, fruit, food, toys, children's toys. It's really built a community, and I'm really, really happy to see, how our community has responded. So I'm proud of Sunnyvale residents, really, what they've done, what they've been able to pull together. If you're out on a walk this week, wave, say hello. It's going to be beautiful, a beautiful week. People miss that social interaction, but Sunnyvale will emerge from this as a stronger community. We're in this together, and we will get through this together. Thanks for listening. To everyone, please, wear your mask, get vaccinated, and of course, stay safe. Have a great weekend. Have a great week. Take care. Goodbye.